San Francisco shimmered under its golden city lights, cloaked in the soft mist of an early autumn night. Inside an upscale art gallery in Soma, a charity gala was underway. Red wine, gentle jazz, and the kind of polite laughter that always felt rehearsed. Elena Carter, 27, stood behind the pop-up cafe bar, her hands expertly crafting a latte with delicate foam art. The pale brown apron hugged her slender frame, but the tiny paintbrush-shaped hair clip tucked behind her ear was the real giveaway. Elena didn't belong here. She was an illustrator for children's books, doing cafe shifts to make ends meet while she painted by night and posted her work online. She lived off passion, commission crumbs, and the distant hope of publishing her own book someday. "Elle, hurry up! VIP table's waiting on that cappuccino!" Zara, her co-worker, snapped her out of her daydream. Elena smiled politely, handed over the cup, and turned back to her post. But something about tonight buzzed differently, like normalcy was about to be undone. As the evening wound down, Zara pulled Elena and two others into the tiny prep kitchen behind the bar. "Truth or dare," she declared with a mischievous glint in her eye. "Say no, and you down this entire double-shot espresso." Elena rolled her eyes, but Zara's energy was infectious. "Fine, but go easy," she laughed. Zara and Marcus took their turns, nothing wild. Then came Elena's turn. Zara tilted her head. "Truth or dare?" Elena hesitated. She hated talking about herself. Broken dreams, past regrets. "Dare," she whispered, her voice slightly shaky. Zara's grin turned wicked. "Kiss a stranger in this room, but not just anyone, the most unapproachable one you can find." Everyone gasped and laughed. Elena flushed deep red. "You're insane," she muttered. But Zara's stare made it clear, no backing out. Elena stood, wiped her hands on her apron, and scanned the crowd. Elegant suits and sweeping gowns floated past like smoke. But then she saw him. He stood by the gallery window, city lights bouncing off his sharp black coat and jet black hair. His expression was distant, proud, untouched by the chatter around him. "That one," Elena murmured. Zara squinted. "Oh my God, Elle. That's Adrian West, founder of West & Co., practically royalty. Cold as ice, never smiles, even in press photos." Elena swallowed hard. A voice inside told her to abort, but the challenge in Zara's gaze pushed her forward. The music faded behind her, her heartbeat thundered. She stopped a few feet away. "Excuse me," she said, her voice almost a breath. Adrian turned. His gray eyes met hers, piercing, unreadable, but not as cold as she'd feared. She didn't think. She leaned in, placed a gentle hand on his arm, and kissed him. 3 seconds. But they unraveled her. When she pulled back, he was still watching her. Something had softened in his eyes. Her paintbrush clip had loosened, catching the light behind her ear. "What just happened?" Adrian asked, his voice deep but calm, laced with quiet wonder. "It was just a game," Elena whispered, then turned and walked away. Her heart was still trying to remember how to beat. Adrian West wasn't the kind of man who lingered on random moments. His life ran like a streamlined algorithm, precise, structured, and emotionally efficient. But ever since that kiss at the gala, the image of the girl with the paintbrush hair clip kept intruding into his thoughts. Uninvited, unexplained. What was her name, and why did her eyes carry such a quiet ache? A few days later, he found himself typing keywords into a search bar. There weren't many clues, but eventually he stumbled across an Instagram profile filled with delicate children's book illustrations. In one video, she was sketching while a soft guitar tune, clearly self-played, played in the background. The account name, Elena Carter Art. He watched the pastel drawings unfold on his screen. Her art wasn't elaborate, but it was deeply emotive, like someone had bottled up childhood loneliness and spilled it onto paper. One video held him the longest, a little boy lost in a crowd, clutching a paper that read, "I want to go home." His chest tightened. He knew that feeling. 3 days later, Adrian walked into a cozy cafe on Valencia Street, the one draped in ivy, the one she'd worked at during the gala. Elena was wiping down tables, hair pinned up, paintbrush clips still in place. When she saw him, her hand paused mid-motion. A cup nearly slipped from her grasp. "You're here?" she asked, visibly unsettled. "Wanted some coffee," Adrian said, though his gaze seemed to seek something far beyond caffeine. Elena narrowed her eyes, half suspicious. She brought him his drink and stood across the table. "Do you often revisit cafes where you were surprise kissed?" she asked, part teasing, part cautious. Adrian chuckled. A soft, rare sound. "Never. But this seemed worth the exception." Gentle silence settled between them. Elena felt absurd standing there, yet found herself unwilling to walk away. "You saw my art, didn't you?" she asked, voice quieter now. "I did," Adrian nodded. "It's honest. And sad." She looked down. "I draw it to stay sane on my worst days." He paused. "I used to play piano in college. Don't anymore. Work swallowed it whole." Elena raised an eyebrow. "So why this sudden interest in illustration?" "Because art says things words never can." Silence again. But this time, not the kind between strangers. It was the kind between two people who'd been hurt and might be slowly finding each other. A week later, Elena received an email from West & Co., a direct invitation from Adrian himself. The message was brief. "I'm building an art program for underprivileged children. We need someone who understands emotion. Would you consider joining as a creative advisor?" Elena spent nearly an hour typing "I'd love to" and deleting it, then writing it again. In the end, she hit send with a long exhale. She didn't know why she trusted Adrian. Maybe it was the way his eyes never rushed. Or maybe it was because, for the first time, she didn't feel like someone was looking at her like a foolish dreamer. West & Co.'s headquarters was a towering glass building in the financial district. Sleek, pristine, a little too cold. Everything there felt measured, curated. And in that world, Elena, with her watercolor notebook and paintbrush hair clip, looked entirely out of place. But maybe that's what made her stand out. Adrian greeted her in his private office, sunlight pouring through the tall windows. He was the same, dark shirt, composed posture, but this time he made her tea. "Today I'm not a CEO," he said, placing the cup in front of her. "Just someone who wants to do the right thing." They sat across from each other discussing the program, a series of free art workshops for children in inner-city schools. Elena suggested pairing illustration with storytelling, so kids wouldn't just learn techniques, but also learn to give voice to what they carried inside. "Kids are quiet," she explained, "but drawing lets them say the things they can't speak." Adrian nodded slowly. "Like your illustrations." She glanced up, meeting his gaze. Unfiltered, unjudging, something inside her softened. "You don't think I'm just a hopeless idealist?" she asked, half joking. "Quite the opposite," Adrian replied. "You're the only person I've met who reminds me I used to feel things." Elena didn't answer right away, not because she was shy, but because her heart had gone still, like the surface of a calm lake. She told him about a man who once promised to help publish her book, promised a lot, and then vanished after taking her original drafts and the last of her savings. "I started over," she smiled, though her eyes didn't. Adrian didn't interrupt. When she finished, he said quietly, "I was engaged once. She said she loved me, then sold the project I was building to a competitor. I didn't mourn the money, I mourned the trust." Elena nodded gently. She understood. And between them settled something unspoken, an understanding that both had been wounded by people who once claimed to care. "That's why," Adrian said, his voice softer than ever, "I want this project to be more than a program. I want it to reach kids where it matters most." Elena smiled. For the first time in months, it was a smile that wasn't trying to hide. The launch event for the Canvas of Hope art program took place in a renowned gallery space in downtown San Francisco. Over 200 attendees filled the room, from tech investors to nonprofit leaders. Adrian West took the stage with his usual calm, but his eyes kept drifting toward the back, searching for Elena. She stood near the edge of the stage, wearing a simple olive green dress, her sketchbook clutched tightly. Her heart pounded. not because of the spotlight, but because of the way Adrian looked at her while speaking about the mission of the program. We're not just teaching children how to draw, we're teaching them how to feel, how to heal. Behind him, a short documentary played. Children coloring, painting, laughing. The background music, a soft guitar track Elena had composed herself. The final image paused on one of her own drawings. A boy standing in the rain, holding a sign that read, "Still trying to find my way home." Silence swept across the room. Then came applause. Elena's fingers tightened around her sketchbook. In that moment, everything she had endured felt worth it. And then, it shattered. A female reporter stood, microphone in hand, smile polite but cool. "Miss Carter, the artwork featured in the video is deeply moving. However, we've received a tip that one of your illustrations bears a striking resemblance to work by Melinda Key, a veteran illustrator. Would you say her art inspired yours?" Elena froze. Melinda Key? She'd never heard the name. "No," she said, voice trembling. "All of my work is original." The reporter continued, unfazed. "One more thing. It's rumored you once had a relationship with entrepreneur Henry Smith, Mr. West's chief competitor. Is that true?" The room chilled. Elena's breath caught. Henry Smith, the man who'd once promised to help publish her book, then disappeared with her drafts. She hadn't known he was a businessman, let alone Adrian's rival. "I didn't know who he was when I met him," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I have no ties to him, professionally or otherwise." She looked to Adrian. He stood off stage, gripping his glass, his face stone cold. She recognized that expression. Not the man who brewed tea in a sunlit office, but the one still haunted by betrayal. "You think I'm like her," she whispered when she found him after the event. Adrian's gaze was deep, but shut. "Henry Smith? He was part of your past. And now you're standing in mine." "No," she said, breaking, tears rushing in. "I never used you. I just wanted to draw." "She said that too," he murmured. "Then she took everything." Elena's heart splintered. "If you want someone without a past, without mistakes, then I'm not her." She turned, walking away from the applause, the spotlight, and from him. And for the first time in years, she left her sketchbook behind. Adrian West was not a man easily shaken, but since that night, sleep had become a stranger. He kept replaying the launch video, Elena's guitar gently accompanying children's laughter. He stared at the boy in the rain, the painted sign reading, "Still trying to find my way home," and somehow saw himself. Elena hadn't reached out. No messages, no explanations. She had vanished. Her once buzzy Instagram feed had been wiped clean, leaving only one post. "I need silence to repaint what's inside." Adrian knew he'd messed up. But the shadow of the past, the woman who had betrayed him, still loomed, blinding him. And now, he had pushed away the one person who had made him want to trust again. A week later, as he left a tech conference in Silicon Valley, the rain began to fall. Sitting in the back of his car, Adrian opened YouTube. Out of habit more than intention, a new notification appeared. Elena Carter has uploaded a new video, Fractures. He clicked. It wasn't a song, it was a melody, simple, raw piano chords, hesitant like breathing through tears. The video showed only her hands, sketching, a new drawing taking form. Two hands reaching for each other but not touching. In the space between them, handwritten words, "I trusted you." Adrian felt something clamp down on his chest. He whispered, barely audible, "If there's a chance, please let me make it right." The car moved through the rain. Then, screeching brakes, blinding headlights. The driver yelled, "Hold on, Mr. West." Tires screamed, steel crumpled. Adrian was thrown sideways into the window. Everything went dark. And just before consciousness slipped away, he heard her voice. Not through headphones, not from a video, but deep in his memory, in his heart. Drawing is how I name the things I'm too afraid to say. News of the crash spread like sea wind through the city. Tech entrepreneur Adrian West in critical condition after car accident. Foul play suspected. Photos of the mangled car, shattered glass littering the road, filled every news outlet. In a quiet lakeside town near Tahoe, Elena Carter was teaching a children's art class when the alert flashed on her phone. Her hands trembled. The paintbrush dropped to the floor. She read the headline over and over, unable to believe it. Adrian. Crash, critical. She didn't hesitate. She packed her things, left a note for the program director, and drove straight to San Francisco. Through the night. 6 hours through fog and cold air, her only companions, spinning wheels and a single silent prayer. Please don't let this be the end. At St. Francis Hospital, Elena was directed to the ICU. She wasn't family, but a kind nurse allowed her to look in through the glass. Adrian lay still, bandages around his head, tubes in his arms. The man once so sharply composed now looked pale and breakable. Elena placed a trembling hand on the glass, tears falling silently. After several hours, the nurse approached. "You can go in, but no loud sounds," she said softly, though singing quietly might be okay. Elena stepped into the room, sat beside him. She leaned closer and whispered, "Adrian, you once said you couldn't feel anymore, but I know your heart still listens." She took his hand, cold and unmoving, and then she sang. No instruments, no lights, just her voice, raw, slow, trembling. The words from Paper Wings, a song she wrote for him but had never sung out loud. Each line was an apology, a plea, a heartbeat wrapped in melody. As she reached the final line, even broken wings can still remember how to fly. His fingers, just barely, closed around hers. Elena froze. She looked up. His eyes remained shut. But from the corner of one eye, a single tear escaped. Adrian woke on the third morning after the crash. His eyelids fluttered open, hazy from the sedation. The white ceiling lights of the ICU stung his eyes, and he blinked slowly. When he turned his head, he saw a familiar silhouette, a mess of soft brown hair and a paintbrush clip still tucked behind it. "Elena," he rasped, his voice barely audible. She jolted upright, then burst into quiet tears, smiling through them. "I'm here." Adrian furrowed his brow. "Where did you come from?" "Lake Tahoe. I drove all night." She reached for his hand. "I thought I'd lost you." He tried to squeeze her fingers, even though the motion sent pain through every nerve. "I heard you singing." Elena gave a tearful laugh. "I wasn't sure if I believed in that kind of thing." "I did. It was like a sound pulling me out of a dream." Silence drifted between them like soft fabric. Then she reached into her coat and pulled out a worn sketchbook, flipping to a blank page. "I've been drawing for the past 2 days," Elena said, flipping through her sketchbook. The pages were filled with quiet moments, a hospital bed, hands clasped gently, and finally the two of them standing beneath the Golden Gate Bridge, an image she had never dared to draw before. "I didn't know how to help," she whispered, "so I drew what I hoped for." Adrian studied the images, his gaze lingering. Though still weak, he couldn't look away from the honesty in every line. "Elena," he said slowly, "I didn't think you'd come back." She held his hand gently. "I used to run from everything that hurt, but this time, I stayed." Silence wrapped around them, not the empty kind, but the quiet where healing begins. Morning sunlight spilled across the bed, landing softly on the final sketch, where they stood side by side, no longer apart. 1 month later, Adrian West left the hospital with a cane in one hand and more clarity in his eyes than he'd had in years. At his side was Elena, holding her ever-present sketchbook. They walked slowly, as if learning to move again, not just through the city, but through each other's lives. Life hadn't gone back to normal. It had become something different, deeper, slower, and more real. Adrian invited Elena to be the co-creative director of Canvas of Hope, She redesigned the entire program's visual identity and began visiting classrooms, sketching alongside the children and sharing her story. They adored her, not because her art was perfect, but because she didn't hide the cracks in her heart and showed them what healing looked like. On a quiet December afternoon, at a small gallery by the bay, Elena hosted her first solo exhibition, titled "We Can Still Come Home." The paintings hung quietly like whispers, hands held after storms, rooftops rebuilt from rubble, a bridge mended between two broken shores. The final piece had no color, just pencil on paper, and beneath it, a dedication from Adrian. "You are home." After the event, as sunset spilled gold across the harbor, Adrian led Elena to a wooden pier reaching out into the sea. He stopped, turned to her. "The first time you kissed me," he said softly, "you had no idea it would change everything." Elena smiled. "And you didn't know you were about to learn how to feel again." He nodded, reaching into his coat pocket. A small box. Inside, a thin silver ring, engraved with two words. "First sketch." "Elena Carter," he said, eyes steady, "will you help me draw every chapter that comes next?" She froze, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Only if we draw them with our whole hearts." He smiled, slipped the ring onto her finger. She leaned into him beneath the golden light. No more words were needed, because from now on they weren't just sketching pain. They were drawing hope, home, and the kind of future they never believed they deserved.